Hello there, folks. Episode 2 of the Ring Logs, or the R Logs. And there's a few things I need to say how I feel today. One of the regards in how Survivor Series has been building up. Now, this is something we talked about quite constructively at the Survivor Series preview panel last night, which you can now see on my YouTube channel. Sadly, RDR is not on Blip anymore. It's a sad shame, but, you know, decisions were made. Gotta just accept it and move on. But this is on Blip. Isn't that nice? I do feel that the way that they have the build and the setup and structure to pay-per-views now is sorely lacking. Now, if we were to compare this to, say, 2000, 2001, we would have a nice month-long build to a pay-per-view. Now, let's just take the Stone Cold Steve Austin Triple H match build-up. Let's use that as an example. Now, as we all know, in IRL, Austin had to take 10 months out of his career in order to have spinal surgery because he was suffering side effects from what happened with Owen Hart at SummerSlam 97, and he needed to take the surgery and the time out just to be able to have the spinal surgery, let it heal up for a year, and then work himself back in. And the story that they had put into it is like, Rikishi was the guy who executed the act, but the man who planned the whole thing was Triple H. And this was World Wrestling Federation doing some of the most clever writing, because, you know, how do you get Triple H to be put over as a much more evil, sadistic, and cowardly character than by having someone do the dirty work for him, so that in Stone Cold's absence, Triple H would rise up the ranks? Because, let's put this into terms. Stone Cold Steve Austin is, to the World Wrestling Federation and the early days of the WWE, what John Cena is evidently to the success of the company today. Now, Cena's good, but he's no Stone Cold. I mean, and also in my honest opinion, Hulk Hogan does not even come close to the success that Stone Cold had in the mere 6 to 7 years that Austin was in the WWE. Austin eclipsed everyone. I mean, Rock, let's just put it this way, if Rock was a 9.7, Stone Cold was a 9.9 in terms of how popular and how appealable, and, you know, the attitude that he conveyed. Austin represented everyone. I mean everyone. And the way they had the setup with Triple H and Austin, and because keep in mind, this storyline went on for months afterwards, Triple H saw that he could not dominate the World Wrestling Federation if he had Austin in his way, because Triple H knew he could beat The Rock. He'd done that a few times beforehand, but that said, The Rock has beaten the game a few times. And this was when Triple H was really starting to embrace the persona of the game. And it really made for some good TV, watching Raw and SmackDown back in those days, because you never saw it coming. Whereas these days, whereas the writing is so predictable that even the 7 to 8 year old chibis could see this coming from a mile away. You know, probably so cartoony that they could watch an episode of Adam West's Batman and find that more compelling. But I'm just rambling. And it was the way that it was hinted that Triple H might have done it, particularly when Commissioner Mick Foley was doing the investigations. And Austin had this code of conduct. You're all guilty until proven innocent. So kind of like the Spider-Man animated series justice system. And the basics was, if you got stunned, you're proven innocent, you're done. If he was going to take his time with you, say your prayers. That is all. And it was just the way that it was slowly building and building, because all of these accidents were starting to happen around Monday Night Raw and on SmackDown. And Austin had an inkling that it could have been The Rock, because it was The Rock's rental car. Then, of course, it was revealed to be Rikishi that actually drove the car. But it was that one night on Raw in early November 2000. It was supposed to be Rock and Austin versus Rikishi and Kurt Angle in a tag team match. Now, Rock had been taken out backstage, possibly concussed. He was in no state to compete. So it was Austin in a handicap match. And as far as Stone Cold's concerned, that's all fine by him, because he's the type of guy, he would have probably taken on the entire roster of Legacy, Evolution. I mean, considering what happened in early 2004 when Brock Lesnar stole his Stone Cold ATV, Stone Cold was this close to taking on the entire SmackDown roster just to get through to Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar and take his ATV back. But again, we're rambling again. And Triple H comes out as The Rock's replacement in a tag team, and it looks like the game is on Austin's side, because at the time Triple H had just gotten done with a feud with Kurt Angle, where he believed that Kurt Angle was trying to have an affair with his wife in the script at the time, Stephanie McMahon Helmsley, which they are married in real life anyway and were dating at the time, and it just proves that truth can be stranger than fiction, or art can imitate life, if you will. And then it was that 1 second the game clocks Austin and then says, "Your search is over, you big dumb son of a bitch." And then Triple H went to cut this pre-recorded promo in the locker room, all by himself. And the odd thing is, that was a foreshadow of things to come in the future, where he was cutting this 10 to 15 minute promo, and the more he talked, the more the camera was zooming in on him, and he's talking this very quiet, chilling voice, you know, talking about his plan, talking about how he would get Austin out of the way. And that was back in the day when it was really, really clever writing, and it just elevated the game's character to, you know, if he wasn't already this badass character, he was up there with this sadistic and evil, morbid persona that he wanted to be on top of the WWF more than anything. But in order to do that, he didn't want to do it the fair way. He wanted to do it by taking out the biggest superstar that they had on the roster, and that was Austin. And you look at other matches that came about, like, for example, how the matchup between The Rock and Rikishi came to be. Now, earlier in that year, Rock and Rikishi were, you know, tight as family, because they are actually cousins. And when it was revealed that Rikishi had done the dirty deed and was the one that ran over Stone Cold, and then claiming that The Rock had asked him in a phone call that, "I need you to do me a favor," and Rock is just absolutely disgusted. It's like, you know, I don't want no part of this. And of course Rikishi, thinking, you know, like, The Rock has turned his back on me, and then decides to see to it that The Rock's life is made a living hell. And if it wasn't bad enough, on the night of No Mercy 2000, where he was facing Kurt Angle for the WWF title, Rikishi comes in and inadvertently costs The Rock the title, and did so the same, the night after on Raw, where Angle was facing Rock, Triple H, and if I'm not mistaken, he might have been facing Chris Benoit. I'm not entirely sure. If you do know of that main event that happened on Raw the night after No Mercy 2K, comment section below. But that was how they did some really good storytelling. They actually took their time to build the stories, to add depth and weight and character to the matches that built up, and we're not seeing that today. The only times that you get the exception is when there's that build-up between the February pay-per-view and then WrestleMania. Then, of course, that depending on what month WrestleMania is actually in, because you do get the odd exception where WrestleMania will be in March or WrestleMania will be in April. And I think it's going to get to a stage where they need to consider reducing the pay-per-view calendar a little. Now, some people have argued that they need to bring it back down to 4 or 5 a year. Here's what I think that needs to be done. You have your Royal Rumble. You have your last pit stop before WrestleMania in February, whether it's No Way Out or the Elimination Chamber. And then you have a couple of months break, you go to King of the Ring. Then you go to SummerSlam. Then you go to Survivor Series, then maybe you have one more pay-per-view. But when we're in a pay-per-view market, when we get something like 13 to 14 pay-per-views a year, this is a problem. There's also a problem in a similar regard, because in 2006, with the added addition of the ECW brand brought back into WWE, I think we had something close to 16 pay-per-views for that year, because you had the ECW One Night Stand, where Rob Van Dam cashes in his Money in the Bank contract and will actually face John Cena one-on-one. And that was one of the few times I actually liked the fact that RVD wasn't going to do the sort of attack from behind thing and then take the belt off somebody whilst they're out cold. He's like, no, I want to face you one-on-one. People win championships when they've beaten the best by becoming the best. And then, of course, there was ECW. There was ECW's December to Dismember, which featured the first ever Extreme Elimination Chamber match, which saw Bobby Lashley become the ECW champion. And best to my understanding, the only other title that that gentleman ever had was the United States Championship. And again, I have to reiterate, when you have too many pay-per-views, or have it set to a point whereby there's too little distance between one and the next, you haven't got time to set the matches up properly. And in the case of Survivor Series, where we have, when matches were beginning to be installed to the pay-per-view, I mean, in the same week, we had Big Show versus Randy Orton announced for Survivor Series. Now, I'm not going to narc too much on the Big Show, because I wouldn't say I'm not a fan of the Big Show, but I'm not a die-hard fan of the Big Show. I have full respect for what he has accomplished throughout his career. It's not easy for a guy his size to be able to have too many good matches. And I'm not narking on him. It's simply because it's not really compelling TV to see someone at 7'2", 460 pounds overpowering someone over time. And after a while, it gets kind of boring. Now, if we had a situation where we had a couple of more guys, Big Show size, having feuds with Kane, Taker, maybe Carly if they were that desperate, want to make this clear. I'm not narking on Khali the person. I'm narking on Khali's abilities and the fact that the guy just cannot wrestle. I mean, as a face, he's somewhat entertaining. I personally felt he was much more effective and at his best when he was a heel back in 2006, when he was brought in on ECW and then having feuds with Batista over on SmackDown. And there was one of those years where Batista had far too many title shots that any man should be granted, but that's for another time of discussion. And, you know, we're a week away, 6 days at the time of this recording, and we only have 3 matches signed. If this had been, like I say, 10 to 12 years ago, with a week away, we would have had at least 5 to 6 matches signed, maybe with 2 to 3 traditional Survivor Series matches, a couple of title matches, and then maybe one big feud match. I mean, you look back down the years where you see matches like Team Angle versus Team Guerrero, and then we had Team Evolution versus Team Raw. Now the setup with that was, with Angle and Guerrero, it was just classic Survivor Series elimination match, nothing was on the line. But with Team Evolution versus Team Raw, now Team Evolution comprised of Triple H, Dave Batista, Gene Snitsky when he had his foot fetish gimmick, yes, and the Rated R superstar Edge, against the team of Team Raw, Randy Orton as the captain. You had Maven, and this was probably the only time this guy ever got a high-profile spot, along with Y2J, Chris Jericho, and Chris Benoit. And the prize at the end of it was Eric Bischoff wanted to take a month off because he was overworked, didn't want to deal with the crap, and I suppose Bischoff, like I say, was just looking to have some downtime because it's difficult when you're on the road every single night. And the prize would be the team that won the match would have control over Monday Night Raw for a month, and each team member got their turn to be the GM for Raw for a week. With Maven, he wanted a title shot against Triple H for the World Heavyweight title, and I don't blame the guy. You know, he could have taken Triple H's offer at the time to join Evolution, where he would have been a patsy to him like Batista and Orton and Flair would have been back in the day. Pretty much like how the setup is now. The only difference is Triple H is the authority trying to be Vince McMahon. It's painful. And with Chris Benoit, he wanted a match with Triple H to say, look, you know, come on, I want my shot at the belt, but he ended up having a cage match with Edge. And it was also, I think that was the first time we ever saw a Divas Steel cage match with Lita versus Victoria. If I'm wrong, comment section. Jericho's was a lot of fun because he had like this sort of party going on backstage, and he set up the main event on Raw, Trish Stratus versus Lita. Lita getting her first women's title in 4 years, which ain't bad. And Randy Orton, he had like the Randy Orton lingerie party with the likes of Christy Hemme, who I miss not being in WWE, and Stacy Keibler, probably one of the nicest women that's ever been in that company. But that was a good example of how you build storylines. You know, you build them up gradually and slowly, make the audience care about it. And I'm getting the sense that there isn't that sense of weight, of integrity with the story now in regards to the way they set it up, because they just sort of like, right, we got the story, you go in there now. And it's like, what's the setup? You know? And I really don't know what to make of it. I really don't. And, you know, with this nonsense from the WWE officials that apparently Daniel Bryan is responsible for the low ratings on Monday Night Raw, which in actual contrast, it would actually tell you the fans tuned in to see Daniel Bryan get closer and closer to becoming WWE Champion again. And, well, I will admit, it was a fast count at Night of Champions, but at the same time, you know, once the referees made a decision, you know, it's irreversible. You can't just strip the... Of course, Triple H goes and strips Bryan of the belt. And I think this is the writers and the officials' way of trying to bury Daniel Bryan, because the fans are rebelling against the system, saying, look, no, we don't want Randy Orton as our champion. We like Daniel Bryan. He's the underdog. Over that summer, and I've been saying this for so many months, Daniel Bryan had been on possibly one of the best runs that any WWE superstar had ever had. He was constantly going for it. He loved what he was doing, and I think it just got to such a point that the officials were like, you know, they're not eating what we're feeding them. They actually want someone that we don't want as champion. I've said it once, I'm going to say it again. WWE is WCW. Triple H is Hulk Hogan. And, you know, it really sickens me as a fan when the policy and the system that made, you know, the likes of Triple H, Brock, Austin, Jericho, Edge, household names back in the day. Yeah, they took risks, taking a chance on these guys, but Jim Ross said it best: the people and the fans are always right. We listen to them. They're not doing that today. And this is probably, and from what I understand, Vince McMahon actually tells Michael Cole to keep plugging the WWE app. Now, Vince McMahon, as a businessman, you know, he's successful for a reason. You know, to be able to take a localized wrestling territory promotion like the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, then to the World Wrestling Federation, then WWE. I mean, he took a calculated risk, but it paid off. But the problem that is facing the WWE today is that they're not prepared to take risks anymore. They just keep repeating the same tired and repeated angles over and over, that when they do it, it's just so painful. I mean, while they're trying something new with Kane, because I know every now and again you gotta shake things up, but it would have been nice if they could have just shaken things up that would have seen Kane maybe have a little bit more fun, or just maybe be that slightly freakier in a nice way. Not creepy stuff like that Katie Vick crap that happened in '02. Less we say about that, the better. But corporate Kane, I don't know what to make about that. I mean, it's just the idea of Kane in a suit. That'd be like Big Show posing for Playgirl. It's ridiculous. You know, no one would want to see that. I really don't know what to make of it, folks. I'm at a loss for words. WCW went out of business in 2001 for ridiculous storylines, letting the veteran talent monopolize and hog all the top spots, and not allowing the little guy to come up through the ranks and make a name for themselves. Steve Austin, The Rock, Jericho, Kurt Angle, and Edge all came up because they worked their way through the hard way. They earned their place at the top spot. And while John Cena earned his place at the top because the fans loved him back in the day, most of the fans is kind of split down the middle these days. With Randy Orton, I get the sense that favours were pulled. That's just my opinion. I don't know that for fact, but that's the sense that I get, because no talent member that has failed 2 wellness tests and caused problems backstage is put back into the main event picture without having done something. Now, I don't know this for fact. I'm just saying what you're all thinking. Either that, or they forgave him and actually thought, you know what, we've got to let bygones be bygones, because when somebody's done their time, you've got to let them be able to move forward and put the past behind them, because otherwise we're doomed to repeat history. If that's the case with Randy Orton, then fine. But it just looks a little bit suspicious. That's just my opinion. That's been episode 2 of The Ring Logs. 1, 2, 3. Show's over.